This is Joe Biden, the resident of the United States. Recently, Biden has shifted into re-election mode, where normally one would tout their accomplishments since taking office. But Joe Biden's positive accomplishments are few and far between, which means that Joe Biden has no other choice.
Donald Trump and his MAGA friends, Donald Trump and his MAGA friends, Trump and his MAGA friends, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump.
Seriously, what's Joe Biden going to talk about? The Inflation Reduction Act? That didn't actually reduce inflation? Yeah, right. Instead, Joe Biden is going to take every opportunity he can to demonize Donald Trump.
Think about this, especially here in South Carolina, a proud military state. Donald Trump, when he was commander-in-chief, refused to visit a cemetery, U.S. cemetery outside of Paris for fallen American soldiers. And he referred to those heroes, and I quote, as suckers and losers. He actually said that.
But did Trump actually refuse to visit the graves of the fallen in France? And did he call World War I heroes losers and suckers? Well, let's go back into history a little bit. You see, Biden is getting this narrative from a September 2020 article published by The Atlantic, where according to 4 people with first-hand knowledge, claimed that President Trump didn't want to visit En Marne American Cemetery in France, saying, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." And that the more than 1,800 Marines buried there were suckers for getting killed. So who were these 4 people with first-hand knowledge? Couldn't tell you, because they are anonymous sources. Because of course they are. The article starts out, when President Donald Trump canceled a visit to the En Marne American Cemetery near Paris in 2018, he blamed rain for the last-minute decision, saying that the helicopter couldn't fly and that the Secret Service wouldn't drive him there. Neither claim was true. But according to an email sent by a military aide to the president, it was true. Team, we are a bad weather call for today's lift. And according to contemporaneous reporting by the Associated Press, the determination to ground Marine One, the president's helicopter, due to bad weather, is made by the Marine Corps and the White House Military Office, which then presents the recommendation to the White House in collaboration with the Secret Service, according to a Secret Service official. And at the time, Trump responded to all the criticism for not attending the ceremony by tweeting that the helicopter couldn't fly and he suggested driving. But the Secret Service said, no, too far from airport and big Paris shutdown. And then he called all of the outrage fake news. So right off the bat, the opening premise of the Atlantic article is wrong. And despite the fact that the White House provided proof debunking that claim, outlets like the Washington Post attempted to give the Atlantic cover. When faced with a negative story, a common tactic by any government agency, especially the White House, is to seize on one element that may be slightly off in an effort to discredit the entire report. But to reiterate, the Atlantic article with its 4 first-hand sources and her claims about the cemetery decision isn't slightly off, it's completely wrong. And the White House provided proof and witnesses backing up that fact that the helicopter was grounded due to bad weather. And yet, despite indisputable evidence, the Atlantic has not issued a correction or updated their article because journalistic integrity doesn't exist anymore.
We had 25 people that were witnesses that are on the record already that have said that never took place. It never took place, what they said, with no sources, no nothing. They got nothing. And I have 25 real witnesses with the names, with everything, saying it never happened.
But then the Washington Post comes out with a fact check saying, but actually, the White House has collected the names of 25 people who claim to refute Goldberg's reporting on the cemetery decision. Trump called them witnesses, but that's wrong. 11 people on the list were not with Trump. And fine, it was only 14 people who went on the record and had first-hand knowledge. But to the Washington Post, that's not good enough. 14 people who were traveling in France as part of the president's entourage have disputed elements of Goldberg's report. That sounds like a big number, but you have to consider who is speaking and their level of credibility. For example, the fact checker looked at these statements by Stephen Miller, Hogan Gidley, and Dan Scavino, and when they couldn't find anything wrong with them, wrote, "Analysis, 3 of Trump's most loyal aides, one of whom now works for the Trump campaign, and 2 of whom still work at the White House. They would walk through fire for Trump. So caveat emptor." Now, one of the 14 witnesses is former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who is not a fan of President Trump and is one of his biggest critics. Bolton wrote the following about the events in France in his memoir, The Room Where It Happened. Marine One's crew was saying that bad visibility could make it imprudent to chopper to the cemetery. The ceiling was not too low for Marines to fly in combat, but flying POTUS was obviously something very different. If a motorcade were necessary, it could take between 90 and 120 minutes each way, along roads that were not exactly freeways, posing an unacceptable risk that we could not get the president out of France quickly enough in case of an emergency. Now, if you read the book, you'll notice that John Bolton doesn't say anything about Trump calling World War I heroes losers or suckers. And believe me, if Bolton heard it, he would have written about it. The press turned the canceling the cemetery visit into a story that Trump was afraid of the rain and took glee in pointing out that other world leaders traveled around during the day. And Bolton is correct. As an example, Axios made sure to point out that other world leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, all made Saturday trips to memorials and cemeteries despite the weather. In response to that criticism, Bolton writes, "Of course, none of them were the President of the United States. But the press didn't understand that rules for US presidents are different from the rules for 190 other leaders who don't command the world's greatest military forces." However, Bolton is being very naive here. The press totally understood that, but they just couldn't resist leaving that context out in an effort to make President Trump look bad. Now, the Washington Post's fact checker could have started and ended on John Bolton's recollection of what took place in France, but instead, they continued pushing this bullshit by pointing out who didn't make a statement defending Trump. Strikingly, 2 people who figure prominently in the article, then White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, General Joseph F. Dunford Jr., have not commented. Their silence on this explosive story certainly is important in evaluating its accuracy. Both men would have the credibility to refute the reporting, so readers could consider their refusal to comment as some sort of confirmation. So according to the fact checker, all of these people, you need to take their word with a grain of salt. But these 2 who didn't comment, well, their silence is deafening. Now, General Dunford hasn't done any interviews since he retired back in 2019 and has yet to comment what happened back in France. John Kelly, on the other hand, who was fired by President Trump back in 2019, gave an exclusive statement to CNN in October 2023 and wrote that Trump is a man who rants that our most precious heroes who gave their lives in America's defense are losers and wouldn't visit their graves in France. Except that's not true, because here's President Trump in 2018 visiting graves in France at the American cemetery of Serin. And maybe people should consider that if President Trump wasn't interested in honoring fallen American soldiers in France, then why would he bother going to France for the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day in the first place? And keep in mind that John Kelly is not providing any detail on the supposed cemetery decision or suggesting that he saw any of it firsthand. In fact, he's not definitively confirming that anything in the Atlantic article, which happened in France, actually happened. But by giving CNN this laundry list compilation of all the bad things that Trump has been accused of over the years, John Kelly's credibility comes into question, specifically with this part of the statement where he accused Trump of being a person who demonstrated open contempt for a Gold Star family, for all Gold Star families, on TV during the 2016 campaign. Kelly is referring to the Khan family, who made remarks at the 2016 Democrat National Convention ripping into Trump, and Trump ripped back. But the way the media and Never-Trumpers spun it was, oh my God, you're not allowed to say negative things about a Gold Star family. Like losing a loved one gives them immunity from criticism or something. Give me a break. The New York Times even quoted Hillary Clinton, who blasted Trump on the matter and said that he was not a normal presidential candidate. Someone who attacks everybody has something missing. Which is deeply ironic, considering that 3 months later, Hillary Clinton would make one of the largest political blunders in history by insulting roughly 30 million Americans.
To just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Now, regarding John Kelly, there's a credibility issue. If Kelly was so bothered by Trump criticizing a Gold Star family back in 2016, then why did John Kelly agree to be Trump's chief of staff in 2017? And if Kelly was so upset that Trump called World War I heroes losers and suckers and refused to go visit their graves, then why would he be so vague in his statement to CNN? Why wouldn't he give an exclusive interview and go into detail about what Trump said? Well, he can't because it never happened. Now, the Washington Post's fact check puts a ton of weight into what John Kelly didn't say. But what they didn't bother to mention is that John Kelly was a deciding factor in the decision not to go to Enmarn American Cemetery. John Bolton wrote in his memoir, "The weather was bad, and Kelly and I spoke about whether to travel as planned. It was a straightforward decision to cancel the visit, but very hard for a Marine like Kelly to recommend, having originally been the one to suggest Belleau Wood, an iconic battle in Marine Corps history." Trump agreed. In other words, when Kelly told CNN in his statement that Trump refused to go to the cemetery, he was lying. Again, Trump didn't refuse to drive there, because John Kelly had already made the recommendation not to drive, which Trump agreed to. But the truth is something that will never stop Joe Biden.
Donald Trump, when he was commander-in-chief, refused to visit a cemetery, U.S. cemetery outside of Paris for fallen American soldiers. And he referred to those heroes, and I quote, as suckers and losers.
And look how angry Biden is over a thing that Trump supposedly said.
He actually said that. He said that. How dare he say that? How dare he talk about my son and all of us just like that?
Wait, Beau Biden fought in World War I? Come on, man. And to compare, watch Joe Biden at a campaign event announce the death of 3 soldiers killed in a drone strike in Jordan.
One last thing, I want to point out that we had a tough day last night in the Middle East. We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases.
So under his command, 3 U.S. soldiers were killed and more than 40 other service members were injured, and Biden sounds like someone who just woke up. We had a tough day last night.
And we shall respond.
So instead of a statement of strength and resolve, we get no wonder why our adversaries do whatever the hell they want. So basically, Joe Biden shows more emotion talking about the bad orange man than he does when our enemies attack our troops. The fact is that no matter how much Joe Biden rants and raves about Trump, or Trump's supposed lack of respect for our military, no one is forgetting Joe Biden's disastrous withdrawal of our troops in Afghanistan and how his incompetence led to the death of 13 service members. And they definitely won't forget the disrespect that they saw during their dignified transfer event when Joe Biden kept checking his watch like a petulant child. Anyway, that's it for now. Please keep this image in mind when you vote in November. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time, if there is a next time.